Do you want to annoy your opponents and take control of the board with a sneaky and nasty opening? Or maybe you just don't know what to do when you're playing with black. Well, today, I'm going to teach you how to shock your opponents with the Englund Gambit. It's bold, it's unexpected, and best of all, it's super effective against, well, not so great players. Let's dive in. The Englund Gambit starts after d4 e5. Now, this may look strange, because it is. You're sacrificing a pawn right away, but trust me, there's a method to the madness. And because I know you're probably too lazy to look it up, I did the math for you. About 50% of players between 400 and 1000 ELO will accept the Gambit. Let's say your opponent accepts it and takes the pawn.
Oh no, what an idiot. They just gave me a pawn for free.
Now, what do? You immediately apply pressure and activate your knight with knight c6. Most players will defend their pawn with knight f3, and here's where the fun begins. You play queen e7, adding another attacker to that pawn. And guess what? Statistically, 46% of your opponents will try to hold onto the pawn by playing bishop f4. That's exactly what we want. But chessplug, what do I do if my opponent plays something else, like knight c3 or e3? Well, my friend, in that case, you either take the pawn and play as if you'd never even watched this video. Simple, right? Now, back to the main idea. Let's assume your opponent stubbornly defends the pawn. This is where you go straight for the attack with queen b4 check. This move checks the king while attacking both the bishop and the pawn. At this point, most of your opponents are completely out of their comfort zone, and that's where the magic happens. Here's what happens next. 63% of your opponents will blunder right away by playing something ridiculous like c3 or knight c3. In these cases, you just win a free piece. Others might try queen d2, where you win the pawn and on the next move the rook. Now you are leading and you can play your normal game. Now, the best move they can play in this situation to block the check is bishop d2. But even then, no problem. Keep up the tempo by capturing the undefended pawn on b2, threatening their rook. 22% of players will fall right into this trap by playing bishop to c3, thinking they're being clever. They believe they're defending their rook, and their bishop is protected by the knight. But little do they know. This is exactly what we want them to do. Here's where we deliver the punch. You pin their bishop with bishop to b4. And boom, their position is already in serious trouble. This position is a whopping plus 4.2 for black. Now, let's see how your opponents typically react in this miserable situation. Spoiler. None of their options are good. The most common response, with 32% of players, is to take your bishop with bishop takes b4. But guess what? You simply recapture their bishop with your knight, and on the next move, you either snag their knight or their rook, depending on what they try to save. Easy game. Just look at this. A 4.3 boost for black. The second most common move, played by 26% of opponents, is queen to d2, blocking the pin with the queen. And here's where we strike again. You take their bishop on c3, pinning their queen to the king. Now this, my friends, is the dream scenario for any Englund Gambit player. With a 92% chance, your opponent will instinctively recapture the bishop with their queen. And now, ladies and gentlemen, drumroll please. This is a checkmate in just 8 moves. But hey, there's always that rare 8% who take with the knight instead. No problem. Just clean up the entire queenside, leaving them down by 6 points in material. Total domination. Alright, let's rewind and see what happens if white blocks the pin with one of their knights. This is another popular move, played by 20% of opponents. If they block with their knight on b1, you take their bishop with your bishop, keeping up the pin. And when they inevitably go after your queen, no big deal. Just give a quick check, trade off your bishop, and escape from the danger zone. With plus 4 in material. When they block with the knight on f3, same principle. Trade the bishops and leave with a piece winning and take a free pawn. Totally plus 4 in material. At this point, you're miles ahead in material and control of the board. It's a fantastic start, and your opponent is left scrambling to recover from this nightmare. But what I need to tell you is, all this great stuff can only happen at the point where your opponent does not play knight c3. This is the most critical move for us. When he plays this move, then he probably already knew the gambit and knew the moves against it. But it's not that bad for black. You just put your bishop on the same spot b4, and when he threatens your queen, slip out of there. This position is like plus 1.5 for white. Even then, you're not out of the game. Play smart, keep the pressure on, and with creativity, you can turn things around. See you next time.